Good morning, everybody. I have picked up for my presentation on the title of this session, which was the question of whether impact investing is going to be the next big disruption in finance. And I want to start off outrightly, given the limitation of time that we have. I'll give you the answer to that question from my perspective beforehand. And my answer is, I hope it is not. And the reason why I hope it is not is because when we look back at the history of financial markets, disruption generally meant the emergence of major societal crises. And the last one is actually dating back to 2007. And I think we are holding this conference in a country that has been suffering for a decade from the outfall of this crisis, and we are still probably not entirely out of it. So my hope is that impact investing is not going to be the next disruption in finance, but rather is going to be the catalyst for disruption that we need in the way how we are organizing our economic life in general. And when I talk about changing the way how impact investing is affecting the economic life, I'm not talking about relabeling and doing things on a different name that we would have done otherwise anyways. I'm talking about a way of doing away with absolutely illogic ways of doing business that we are currently still upholding. And if I'm talking about the impact that impact investing can make in finance, I'm not making an appeal to people to do things for good or for ethical reasons, but just because the alternatives that we are still doing today simply don't make sense anymore. And I'm going to walk you through a few pointers of what we are doing in business today, what we are doing in societal life today, that do not make sense at all anymore, and what we have to do in order to change that. And I'm going to finish off with 5 predictions on what will drive business going forward. But let us focus first on the question of what do we need to disrupt. Let us look at things that we are doing. Actually, when you go to a restaurant nowadays, you have got 80% of chance that you're taking in more in polyethylene plastics than you're taking in omega-3, which is the normal reason why you should eat fish. And the reason for that is because we have created out there in the ocean a country recognized by the United Nations that is called Garbage Patch State, which has 24 times the surface of metropolitan France, and actually is composed of plastic waste that we have produced and that we are fueling into the ocean every day. We also live without any scruple on the fact that 98% of everything we own at every second of the day is not in use. Imagine what that means in efficiency of resources that we employ. And imagine what that means if every citizen on the planet has the same claim of a living standard. We also live comfortably with the question of how we are going to organize our energy supply for a growing economy. And at the same time, we are not exploiting the biggest energy resource that Europe actually have, which is saving energy. If we equipped in Europe every single household, every single real estate with economically sensible thermal insulation, we would save the energy of 28 nuclear power plants. Imagine what it takes to put one power plant into the market. And we still live with the magic number of 28.7 in the consumer goods industry. This figure stands for the statistical peak in number of months after purchase in which any consumer good appliance in electronics typically defaults. And the reason for the figure of 28.7 is because the consumer good industry, with that, has got 4 months of margin over the point in time where the warranty expires. And up from that point onwards, you have to pay for the replacement of the device rather than the supplier. And that is something which we have built in with technological obsolescence, which we are building our linear growth model on that our economy lives off. And finally, we do dump every year 340 billion of non-perished food, while it costs 120 billion of US dollar investment to feed the planet. We have got an economic system that lives with this contradiction, and at the same time we have our head of states that ask themselves the question how we can actually stop migration from channeling into Europe. If we want to break out from that cycle, out of pure logic of maintaining value creation, we need to change the way businesses are done. And that is the reason why I am making 5 predictions of what businesses and value of businesses will be driven going forward. And here they are. My first prediction is that the value of any business going forward will be equal to the value of the solution that they bring to societal challenges. This is something that translates not only in investor behavior, but also translates in consumer behavior, and the fact that we have more and more challenges that are not only a kind of thing that we need to avoid, but something that we can make a genuine selling proposition of businesses. I also predict that a significant part of revenue streams going forward will come from outside the traditional buyer and seller relationship. We are used to the fact that in the past we had this relationship where you produce something, you've got somebody who buys your product, and you then find a way of increasing your number of customers and increasing the frequency at which you're selling products to your customers. But we are now living in an era where actually more than one party are ready for paying for societal value that is created by businesses. And actually, in many countries, we are moving into a situation where governments are becoming participants of a market where social impact is traded for money. I have mentioned already before that the linear growth consumer model is dead and will be replaced by the user model. We cannot afford ownership of everything that we use to sustain our living standard going forward. And the user models, where you basically pay for the availability of a good rather than for the ownership of the good, is going to become the norm. Finally, instant transparency and accountability will make societal responsibility the most decisive factor for competitiveness. We are living in the digital economy where actually any screw up a company makes in terms of societal responsibility becomes globally known even before the communication manager of that company wakes up in the morning. And that is something which has become such a powerful means of directing businesses that consumer can use it, that investors can use it, that we all can use it. Ultimately, when we talk about profitability of businesses, in the past we have been talking about all kinds of concepts, be they in good or in bad terms with societal goals. And you could actually be perfectly profitable in the past without creating any value at all. Going forward, the challenge of investors will be to identify businesses and to direct their business models to a way to monetize societal value. And that will be the only means to make profit at all. Thank you very much.